Well, that song's exactly what we're talking about, ringing the message out, make sure the message gets out there, because people are desperate. People are in desperate need of the truth. And so that'll kind of guide our thoughts this morning. And I hope to encourage you to have gospel conversations. This morning in the class, we were talking about the gospel conversation is just bringing the gospel into a regular conversation. Bringing up Jesus in conversations with anyone that you might be talking to, making sure that there is room for Jesus or putting in a good word for Jesus, somehow making sure that His name is brought into your conversations. And I say that, and you might think, well, how do I do that? How do I just say Jesus? You know what? Sometimes that's all you have to do, is you can thank Him in the conversation. You can say, well, yeah, because of Jesus, we can do this or that. You remember you used to say, and you might hear some folks say, Lord willing, right? Remember that? Remember that phrase? Lord willing, this or that. Well, we'll bring Him into these conversations like that. Okay? We can learn a lot from our grandparents about bringing Jesus into conversation. And for them, it wasn't because they were trying to bring Jesus into conversations. It was just the way they talked. Just the way things were done. And so as we desire to have gospel conversations, as we desire to be more effective in bringing the gospel to people around us that we might have influence on, this morning we looked at one gospel sharing tool, and it's the gospel according to you. You know, what has Jesus done in your life? What's different about your life now that you know Him as opposed to when you didn't know Him or didn't follow Him? And so today we'll just kind of continue with that idea and that theme. In Matthew 19, verse 26, Jesus says something in response to some who are asking Him questions. And He's been telling them a hard truth, specifically about marriage, but He answers this question, who can be saved? Who can really even do this? And He says there in John 19, 26, you know, with men it's impossible, but with God all things are possible. Do you believe that? Do you believe that all things are possible with God? He created everything, okay? He is Lord of everything. If you're breathing, if your heart is beating right now, it's because He exists. And without Him, there is nothing. And so all things are possible with God. That's what He says. That's what He tells us. And that's what He wants us now to share with others. So often in our time, in our day and age, we are struggling with a counterfeit Christianity. We're struggling with an idea of cultural Christianity rather than biblical Christianity. And what I mean by cultural Christianity is, we know some of the things that Christianity expects. We know that there is something about love. There's something about being kind to one another, treating other people the way we want to be treated. And that's what Christianity, the depth of Christianity is for cultural Christians. Something interesting that happened last year was Richard Dawkins. I don't know if you remember Richard Dawkins from around 2002 to 2010. He was a pretty popular guy. After the attacks on America in 9/11 in 2001, a guy named Sam Harris, neuroscientist, wrote a book, and he titled it "The End of Faith." And right after that, Richard Dawkins came out with this idea of the God delusion. His description of this book, he said, I hope that if someone has faith and they pick up this book, by the time they put it down, they will have no faith in God. That was his goal. And he was very successful with it. Back then, we called them the 4 horsemen of the new atheism. Okay? And they spread it like wildfire here in the United States. Little did we know that it wouldn't be very long after that COVID would come and hit this country, that it would be a worldwide thing where people were shut out and where many churches closed their doors. And so when the doors reopened after that, there were a lot of people who didn't come back. And I would say a lot of that has to do with the new atheism that had been spreading, the idea of a secular mindset that somehow replaced a Christian mindset in this country. And yet, in 2005, in an interview, you can look this up on YouTube. It's pretty interesting. It's kind of hard to understand because he's English, well, he's actually South African, and the way that he speaks is a little bit hard to understand, but you should listen to what he says. He's in an interview about Christianity and the spread of Islam in England, and he says several times how Christianity is much to be preferred by him than Islam, and that he sees them going down the wrong track in their society and in their government. And one of the things he says is that he's on Team Christian as far as he's concerned. He's on Team Christian. This is the guy who wanted to tear Christianity apart and still does. Don't get me wrong. He's not claiming to be a Christian. But in the same interview, he claims to be a cultural Christian. And he talks about his love of Christmas carols. He talks about his love of the idea of the expression of treat other people the way you want to be treated. But he makes very clear and states very plainly he doesn't believe in Jesus, and he doesn't believe that he rose from the dead. Cultural Christianity. Well, when you think of cultural Christianity, I hope that you'll recognize, there are universities. Harvard University, back in, 1600s, built and started for the glory of God. And still on their degrees, when someone is handed that piece of paper, probably mailed later, at the top of it, it says, "For the glory of God." You believe that? And like that Harvard degree, many people who say they believe in Christ have come to a place where it's just words. It's just something that's there because it's maybe expected to be there, yet it holds no weight whatsoever in the way they conduct their lives every single day. No weight at all. No change in behavior, yet this nod to God and then go on and live however you want to, which is exactly what Richard Dawkins and other atheists were hoping that they could accomplish with their attack on Christianity and on faith. Don't be a cultural Christian, be a biblical Christian. To be a biblical Christian, you just need to do what the Christians in the Bible did. You need to put your trust in Jesus Christ and then try to be more like Him tomorrow than you were today. We want to be like they were because we know what they had. You see, Jesus had commanded His apostles to go and make disciples of all the nations, right? In Matthew 28. And after Stephen's death, persecution scattered the followers of Jesus, but it did not silence them, did it? It didn't silence them. They kept going. Acts 8, you see how those who went and were scattered were going everywhere preaching the word. They didn't just go everywhere. While they went, they preached because Jesus had said, "Go into all the world," right? And so while they go, they're talking about Jesus. They're telling people what they saw. They're telling people what had happened. They're sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ, His death, burial, and resurrection. That's the message that they were sharing to make sure people understood what had happened, that God had come into this world and shared in our suffering in order to deliver us from it. And from there, the gospel begins to move with remarkable speed. Philip went down to the city of Samaria, and he preached Christ to them in chapter 8 and verse 5. And later he taught and baptized the Ethiopian nobleman. And that nobleman, he is baptized there, and then he gets in his chariot and he continues on his way down to Ethiopia, no doubt continuing to preach the gospel. In fact, even to this day, Ethiopia is known to be either the first or second Christian nation on this planet. A whole nation of people who said, Jesus is Lord, period. Without any exceptions, without any apologies at all. And it starts with this nobleman, this treasurer of their government. Soon after that, we read about a disciple named Ananias in Damascus, and churches throughout Judea and Galilee and Samaria, of saints in Lydda in Acts chapter 9, verse 32. Many in Sharon turning to the Lord in verse 35 of Acts 9, and disciples in Joppa there in Acts 9. In Acts 10 and 11, the gospel is taken to Cornelius, opening the door of faith to the Gentiles. And those scattered by persecution traveled as far as Phoenicia and Cyprus and Antioch, preaching the word of God. And it's there in Antioch that they're first called Christians. And let's remember what that term means. That term that is endearing to us, that we appreciate, that we respect, that we love. That term Christian actually to them meant little Christ. And the fact is, you get called this sometimes, but it's nothing to be feared. It's exactly what they called them. Little Christ. It was a sarcastic thing to say. And what they were saying was, oh, you're going to save me? Oh, you think I need to be saved from something, and so you're going to be my little Messiah, my little Christ? It was a derogatory thing said about followers of Jesus, disciples of Christ. And we wear it as a badge. We wear it with pride. We wear it and say, no, Jesus paid it all for me. Jesus makes it possible for me to live in freedom and to die in security. And we know that, but many of those outside don't know that. And even some who claim to be Christians don't realize the depth of that because it doesn't actually affect the way they live. If they really understood that Jesus is Lord, how could they continue to live any other way? If you really understand that Jesus is Lord, that He has all authority in heaven and on earth, how is it that we can go to work or to school or across the street or anywhere we go without bringing up what Jesus has done for us? He has delivered us from the power of darkness into His wonderful light. We have the opportunity to work with God, to go about this co-mission of seeking and saving the lost with Jesus. The first way that we can recapture this, the way that we can restore New Testament Christianity even today, is to embody His love. Embody His love. And that starts by deep connection with one another, encouraging one another, helping each other to remember that with God all things are possible. Nothing can stop the spread of His word. Nothing can stop unless the Christians refuse, unless the Christians fall back, unless the Christians come to some conclusion that it's not worth it or it's not possible, going against everything that Jesus taught us. In Romans chapter 12 and verse 9, it tells us, don't just pretend to love others, really love them. Remember what we said? It seems like the gospel is just an acknowledgement of God, just something that's printed on a piece of paper maybe, or something that's a nod to God but then not lived out. The Holy Spirit knew that this was a problem not only for us but for them. Don't just pretend to love others, really love them. Jesus makes it clear in John 15 what love looks like. He says, I don't call you friends. He says, I don't call you servants, I call you friends, right? I don't call you slaves, I call you friends. Why? He says, because everything the Father told me, I've told you. That's what a friend is. Someone who's told you about Jesus. Now, how many friends do you really have? Better question, how many friends have you? How many people have you been a friend to? Jesus says, I'm calling you friends because I've told you what God told me to tell you. Don't just pretend to love others. Really love them. He goes on there in Romans 12, verse 9. Hate what is wrong. Hold tightly to what is good. Love each other with genuine affection. Take delight in honoring each other. Never be lazy, but work hard to serve the Lord enthusiastically. Rejoice in our confident hope. Be patient in trouble and keep on praying. When God's people are in need, be ready to help them. Always be eager to practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Don't curse them. Pray that God will bless them. Be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep. It's not easy to follow these instructions. Bless those who persecute you. But here's the thing. We remember that in Romans chapter 1, verse 16, he tells us that the power of God for salvation is the gospel, which is the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. The power of God, he takes all of His power for salvation, His immense power, and He puts it in this place called the gospel. And the gospel is described to us in 1 Corinthians 15, 1 through 4 as the death, burial, and resurrection. It's God taking on flesh, stepping into humanity, stepping into our world that He created, and suffering with us. And you can write this down if you're keeping notes. Shared suffering is the most powerful force for connection that God gave us. Shared suffering is the most powerful force for connection that God gave us. When you go through something hard and horrible, and you're able to look someone else in the eye and say, yeah, me too. you have an instant connection and a bridge that you can carry the gospel across, because that bridge is strong. That bridge of connection, because of the suffering that you've been through, now you have the right, now you have the ability to speak life into them and to show them the way to Christ. And I would encourage you, the way that it goes is like this. Oh, me too. You know what got me through it? You know that, you know why I'm still here. You know how I'm still doing well. You know how my life is going. It's all because of Jesus. It's because of Jesus that I made it through that. It's because of the love of my church family that lifted me up and ministered to me through that process, through that time. They didn't just pretend to love me. They really loved me. They hated what was wrong, and they helped me learn to hold on to what was good. There was genuine affection given. That's what the gospel truly is. It's God doing that very thing for us, and now He calls us to join Him in doing that for others. That's all gospel conversations really are. It is just sharing the love of God with someone else, just showing them and bringing them closer. In Titus 3 and verse 14, it says, our people must learn to do good by meeting the urgent needs of others. Then they will not be unproductive. Some versions say unfruitful in the kingdom. Think about that. When we are meeting the urgent needs of other people, he says, then you won't be unfruitful. Then you won't be unproductive. You've got to be productive. We want to be productive for the Lord because He has given so much for us. Now we give what He's given. He says, what you've got to do is meet urgent needs that people have. Let me just tell you about that for just a second. At Belline, we started a ministry called Next Steps. And Next Steps is something we told our congregation every Sunday morning for years. When you meet somebody who's in need, tell them our church wants to help. Tell them our church wants to help. Invite them to church. Tell them to come see us. Come see us. At the end of every sermon, there's a regular invitation like all churches give, but we also add a little bit to it. We say, if you're here from the community because you've heard this church will help, there's a group of people who are getting up right now and headed to the foyer, and they're going to go to the Next Step room, and if you're in need, will you please go with them? You see, we call it a Christian initiative because that's what Christians should be doing anyway. Meeting the needs of people around them. And what it takes is noticing. Without an invitation, you got to notice those things. You got to be someone who recognizes that everybody is in need of something. Everyone is either in a crisis or just coming out of a crisis or about to go into a crisis, right? That's life in this planet, in this flesh. And so we need to recognize it, and let's look for needs that we can meet so that then we can meet deeper spiritual needs of introducing them to Jesus. This is the way that we've been doing it. Beltline already had a very strong benevolence ministry. And we know that the works of the church are benevolence, evangelism, and edification. That's what we're here to do. That's what we see the Christians doing in the first century. So that's what we try to do. Well, let's make sure that we put first things first. There is no benevolence that somehow takes the place of the mission of seeking and saving the lost. No, benevolence is done in order to seek and to save the lost. Evangelism, obviously, it's being done to seek and to save the lost. I saw your map back here of all the places where you support missionaries or you do mission work. I want to encourage you. Get a new map. Get a map of Oakman. Get a map of Jasper. Get a map of Walker County. And let's start drawing some lines here. Which houses have you been in? Which families have you encouraged? Who have you helped in order that you might help them spiritually? Let's draw a new map. Let's make sure that we're being effective right here, right across the street, right next door. And edification. Edification is the building up of the body. It's what happens naturally when we are loving each other. Back over in Acts chapter 4 and verse 34, it says that there were no needy people among the church. What a statement. Wait a second. No needy people? That's what it says. Acts 4:34. It says everybody who had something would sell it in order to make sure nobody else was in need. If someone didn't have food, if someone didn't have clothing, if they didn't have a place to stay, other Christians were ready and willing and really eager to make sure that that person was taken care of. Why? Because none of this stuff is going to last. None of this stuff is permanent, but that soul is. That soul is going to live forever. That soul needs to be invested in so that they might use their life to bring someone else to Christ, to teach someone else. And that someone else may just be my child, may just be my friend, might just be someone who I've been hoping to bring to Christ but somehow couldn't. Deep connection with one another. We've got to embody His love by serving each other, by meeting each other's needs with an obvious and public esteem for other people. John 13:34 and 35, He says, I want you to love each other just as I have loved you. You know, it'd be one thing if He just said, love one another. Then we'd be like, love you. Yeah, I love you. But He said, as I have loved you. How did Jesus love you? Sacrificially. For God gave His only begotten Son. Whosoever believeth in Him should have everlasting life. You should have it. Do you? Jesus loved you sacrificially. And so that's what He's asking us to do there in John 13:35. He's not just telling us to love each other. He's telling us to love each other and prove it. To prove your love for one another by sacrificing. Maybe you're just sacrificing your time. Maybe you're sacrificing money. Maybe you're sacrificing popularity. Or somehow being accepted by a group of people who you want to be accepted by. None of it matters when it comes to sharing the gospel. The gospel is the only thing that continues on. And that gospel thread that goes from your heart to the next heart, this is the most important thing about your life. Embody His love. Secondly, we need to employ His tactics. Do what Jesus did today. He said in Luke 19:10 that His mission was to seek and save the lost. And so how do we go about doing it? How do we reach in and teach someone? Earlier we talked about one gospel sharing tool, a timeline where you share your gospel. What is your story of how Jesus has helped you? In the next lesson after lunch, we're going to talk about the 3 circles, and there's sheets of paper out there that we'll be using when we go through that. So how are we going to accomplish this? How are we going to use His tactics? You see, He connected to others in kindness and by meeting their needs. Remember in Matthew 25, the King says in verse 40, I tell you the truth, when you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. So who are you serving? Whose needs are you meeting? He cast a vision for life beyond time and space in order that we might walk with Him. He says that we must love the Lord our God with all our heart, all our soul, and all our mind. He says this is the greatest commandment. And a second one that is equally important, love your neighbor as yourself. How in the world have we lost the fact that Jesus said, yes, loving God is number one, and then He says, and the other number one is loving your neighbor. He doesn't say it's not as important. He says it's equally important. Go back and look at the language. And yet somehow we've made a list of this and pushed this one way down. Love God and love each other. Love our neighbor. Love those who need to be loved to bring them into a relationship with the Lord. This is the tactics that He used, and this is the tactics that we must employ. Last, embrace His mission. Embrace His mission. You see, based on the fact that we are to love one another, the truth is our love for God that we profess, it's actually illustrated, demonstrated, and it is authenticated by our love for one another. Our love for God is illustrated, it is demonstrated, and it is authenticated by our love for one another. And I'm not just talking about the people sitting in this room who we already love and know and have spent our life with. I'm talking about with people everywhere. Any people. Any person that is made in the image of God, all people. Do we really love God, or do we like to say that we love God? Are we cultural Christians, or are we actually following Christ, sacrificially loving one another? If we do, then we will share the gospel and we will call others into relationship with Him. Too often what happens is we're not being discipled into Christ, and we're not being discipled as young Christians, and we fall into a vicious cycle of disappointment. And it's what used to happen to Joey when he would watch Michael Jordan on TV. All right? He would watch Michael Jordan on TV, and then he'd go outside to the basketball goal, and he would try to shoot like Michael Jordan. Right? He would try to jump like Michael Jordan. He would try to... But he couldn't, could he? Because we ain't Michael Jordan. And we want to, but we're not able to. And what happens so often is someone comes to Christ enthusiastically, their sins are washed away, they're excited to tell someone else about it. They go to the first person that they will hope to tell about Jesus, and that person flat turns them down, doesn't want to talk about it. And they become discouraged. They become even, confused about the situation. How did this not work? And that confusion leads to conclusion. We quit trying. We quit helping. We quit noticing because we're just locked in on trying to survive in this world ourselves. This is not the way of Christ. He calls us to help others, to encourage one another, to equip one another, to help each other get established in the faith, to endure with one another, and to entrust one another with the gospel. Christianity is something that is better caught than taught. It's one thing to listen to a whole bunch of lessons, and that can be good. That can be really helpful because faith comes by hearing the Word of God. But the fact is, until you catch it, until you see what the end result is, it's going to be very difficult for you to give it to someone else. Those of you who teach, you recognize when you teach, you learn the subject a whole lot more than when you listen to someone else teaching it, don't you? We do that. We learn so much more when we're actively teaching it. And this is the blessing of being a soul winner for Christ. The more you share the gospel, the better you get at sharing the gospel. The more you bring Jesus into every conversation, the better you get at bringing Jesus into every conversation. And the more you learn to rely on Him, helping the person who you're hoping to teach and bringing them closer to you so that when you speak it, that they're ready to hear it. You see, a disciple is somebody who is following Jesus, being changed by Jesus, and committed to the mission of Jesus. And instead of tacking on a whole lot of other things that really have nothing to do with it, why don't we just focus on that? And learn to help people move from where they are to being soul winners, to being disciple makers as well. As we're taught in 2 Timothy 2:2, it tells us the things that we've heard among many witnesses, to give those to faithful people who will be able to teach others also. Have you ever thought about how long it might take to reach 8 billion people in this world? 8 billion, and I think it's 8,700,000,000 at this point. 700,000. So million. So many people. Do you realize that if just one person decided, I'm going to make a disciple every year who makes disciples, and that disciple understands, okay, I'm going to make a disciple every year who makes disciples. And each one of the disciples who are being made, each Christian who is coming to Christ, if each one of us made this commitment, that it would only take around 33 years. Interesting, how long did Jesus live in the flesh? There's over 8 billion people on this planet, and it would only take us 33 years to reach every single one of them with the gospel. If each one of us were a disciple maker who makes disciple makers. It's within our grasp. It's within our lifetime that we could see the world brought to Christ, a world redeemed for Him. What are we doing? How are we not bringing Jesus into every conversation? How are we not discipling others to know Him and to disciple someone else? Teach the gospel. Teach the gospel. The death, burial, and resurrection. Be able to look at someone in the eye and say, you know what? God said, me too. God said, you know what? I don't like the sin and suffering in this world either. And I want to bring it to an end. And so He created you. And He created me to go and make that difference, to bring that message to the people who are suffering, who are struggling, who desperately need to know Him. I don't know exactly what your situation might be this morning, but I want to encourage you. Jesus can make it better. Jesus can bring it out of the darkness and into the light. Jesus can help you become the person that you long to become. And I know there's a lot of things that get in the way. I know there's a lot of distractions around us. I know there's a lot of things that keep us busy. But the fact is, our mission in this world is to make disciples who make disciples. And if we're not doing that, what are we doing at all? Why would we even gather together? Why would we even spend any time talking about Jesus if we're not going to share Him with people who don't know Him? If we're not going to give this message to the ones who are desperately in need of it? If you're struggling with that, I want to encourage you. Teach somebody the gospel. It doesn't take long. All you got to do is talk about what Jesus has done for you. And it's very interesting. In John 9, we've got a man who has been healed by Jesus of his blindness, and he's being accused. And those who are accusing him, they're saying, oh, you want to blind? Don't you know this man's a sinner? And his answer was, I don't know if he's a sinner. All I know is I was blind and now I see. He said, I don't know. It's okay to say I don't know when someone asks you a question about Jesus, because you have a book where you can find the answer, and it'll just take you a little while. Don't let fear keep you from being a disciple maker. That man who was formerly blind, he didn't let it stop him. And he talked to people who could have thrown him out of the synagogue and ruined his life. And he didn't have any fear. He just continued to say what was true. Won't you take on that spirit? Won't you take on that courage and teach someone the gospel today? There's people all around you who desperately need it. I encourage you to do that. Maybe you're here and you haven't obeyed the gospel. We invite you. Obey his gospel. Have your sins washed away by the blood of the Lamb, and then you too can serve him on this commission to seek and to save the lost and bring another soul into a heavenly home for all eternity. Whatever your need might be, won't you come while we stand and we sing?
Your only Son.